Is the 2024 Honda Transalp 750 the best upper middleweight adventure bike on the market? That's the question that was put to me. Stick with us in this video. I'll give you my thoughts at the end. You can make up your own mind. My name is Steve and welcome to Stand Up Moto. Now, I was lucky enough to have this bike for an extended period. Thanks to my friends down at Moto Adelaide for teeing that up for me. I wanted to know what it would be like to live with. I do some freeway riding, because we all do that when we're adventure riding. Acceleration testing, of course, we want to know what it goes like. My standard braking. I do a lot of dirt road testing. We have almost 500,000 kilometres of unsealed roads here in Oz, and I personally travel lots and lots of dirt roads. I wanted to know what it was like there. I also put it through the windy twisties to find out what it's like with that 21-inch front wheel on the bitumen, pushing it hard. I do a little bit of light, I'll call it, off-road work to see what it's like when you get to that adventure spot, because that's all important. We're calling this an adventure bike, but I guess the best place to start is with the power plant. Powering the Transalp, a parallel twin, that's 2 cylinders, 4-stroke motor, liquid cooled, overhead cams, of course, 4 valves per cylinder, fuel injected, and here in Oz, we get the 90 horsepower version. It might even be a whisker over 90 horsepower. And I have to say, after spending the last week with this bike, riding it, it really is a sweet motor. Acceleration is good. Even on the low traction surfaces, you can really get this thing mobile, and it's got a quick shifter. I'll talk more about that in a sec. Wet multi-plate clutch, cable operated, so you're not worrying about hydraulics and things. It's a 6-speed gearbox. This bike is fitted with the optional quick shifter, and the quick shifter is really sweet. If you're not familiar with quick shifters, basically what they allow you to do is hold the throttle open, shift up through the gears without using the clutch. Momentarily, it interrupts the ignition, takes the load off of the gears, the bike, or you still shift with your foot, but without using the clutch. It's really fast, and you know, to be honest, I haven't worried much about them in the past, but after using this over the last week, and I've put this through its paces, as you'll see in the video, it really is a nice option to have. I found it really handy on these skatey, marbly surfaces where you can just step the back end out and then shift up through the gears without worrying about the clutch. I think in Australia that comes in at about 450 Aussie dollars for the quick shifter. Well worth it. I would definitely option it up with that. This one's fitted also with the optional sump guard. That's a genuine Honda sump guard, beautifully made. It fits into these genuine Honda protection bars, which are a necessity on all adventure bikes. I mean, you've got a lot of plastic here, and of course beyond that plastic you've got a radiator. You don't want to damage that if she comes down hard on the rocks. But optional sump guard, optional protection bars, they are a must. The reason I say the sump guard definitely, the pipes on this parallel twin run down and under the bike. You don't want to damage those on big rocks or drop-offs, but also this motor has a collector, an oil collector on the bottom of the sump, and I think it's pretty exposed, so that is a must. And this is the type of scenario where you need a sump guard just on little drop-offs. You'll hear a little touch. These are a must. I think this is also fitted with the optional foot pegs, slightly larger, good for my big feet to go on, but yeah, a very neat package. Sometimes the bars and sump guards can look like just chunks of aluminium bolted to the bottom, but I think Honda have got it pretty right. Cosmetically, it looks good. Twin 310mm rotors on the front, that's a little over 12 inches. Dual pot Nissin floating calipers up the front. They're nice. The brakes actually work really well, as we may or may not have seen yet in the video. I'll show you that. 21-inch front wheel, oh so important when you're doing off-road work, especially in the sand. If you haven't seen that yet, you will in the video. 90 by 90 front, 21. Tubed tyres. Now, different people, some like tubes, some don't. When I am going on adventure rides, I carry a tube regardless of whether I've got tubed tyres or not. Some prefer the tubeless, but yeah, these are fitted with the Metzeller's. Are they Metzeler? Yeah, Metzeler dual purpose tyres. They actually work a lot better than I was expecting them to. A quick onboard of just how well these ABS brakes work. Check the mirrors, no one there. This is 100 kilometres per hour, or a little over 60 mile per hour. That's impressive. Once again, up the front, 41mm upside down forks, non-adjustable, but I didn't find that an issue at all. I mean, you're not going to be doing any tabletops, but for minor little trail jumps, they're fine. They really work well. You've got about 8 inches or just shy of 8 inches of travel. That's about 200mm. You can see the radiator here at the front. This one's got the radiator guard. Once again, extremely important if you're riding with other riders, because you don't want a rock hitting that when you're out in the middle of nowhere. And for my overseas viewers, when I use that term in the middle of nowhere, I'm referring to the Australian outback. In a lot of situations, when you leave the capital cities and you head inland, you can go for 2 or 3 days without seeing another person. Australia is a massive country and one of the best adventure riding countries in the world, but the conditions can become very hostile, as in the roads, the tracks, etc. You need to be prepared. Things like radiator guards, spare tubes, even if you've got tubeless tyres, carry spare tubes, and the ability to work on your machines is very, very important. Hopefully you can see in this shot a screw-on oil filter, so if you're doing your own oil changes, nice and simple. You will have to take off the sump guard, of course, to get to that and to drain the oil. Just a note I thought I would throw in here: if you're doing your own oil changes, you can see the exhaust and how vulnerable it all is there. The sump guard is a must. There's the oil filter. It's nice and simple to get to when that guard is off. Straight through there to the right-hand side of the pipes. Undo it, it'll come out forwards. But the pipes sweep across to the right-hand side. And I think you're going to find, if you're doing your own changes, you'll need a bit of solvent to wash down that exhaust. Maybe there's a trick to it. If you're an owner, let me know in the comments, but I just thought I would point it out. And while I talk about oil, it holds around that 4 litre mark of oil. It is a good oil capacity, so one would expect longevity out of this engine. It doesn't have the oil window, but it does have a dipstick, nice and simple. The little screen that comes on the Transalp, it's a good looking little screen and easy to replace, etc. It breaks the wind on your chest definitely at highway, motorway, freeway, whatever speeds, and works well at that. I did find for my seating height in the saddle, it was noisy. I wasn't getting buffeting, but I was getting a lot of noise. And I think if you're going to be doing long distance touring, you may want to go taller or shorter to put you into clean air. But it does what it's meant to do, especially tootling around at low speeds like this. Single monoshock damper down in here with adjustable preload, but not on the rebound. We'll talk more about that when we're out on the track. There's the reservoir there for the rear hydraulic brakes. Nice, and actually it's very well protected. Often you see them exposed and you've got to buy covers and things, but you're never going to damage that. Down in there, you can see the master cylinder for the rear brakes there. As I push on the brake lever, non-folding brake lever. Honda's ProLink rear swing arm. Tried and tested. I mean, they're a fantastic swing arm, never an issue there. Yeah, it's all pretty straightforward and simple. If you're a regular to the channel, you know that I love getting to a destination if I'm doing off-road adventuring or adventure riding and then going exploring. This bike really surprised me for an upper middleweight. And by that I mean 250 to 300s being lightweights, 400 to 660s middleweights, 750 to 900, the upper middleweight, 1,000 and above, a heavyweight. But this bike is really capable. Crusted sand is often very awkward on the larger adventure type bikes, as in when you break that crust, you will sink pretty well straight away. But this, yeah, it does it pretty well. This low speed type riding, it really is a lot of fun, but you can miss out a bit sometimes on the larger adventure bikes, especially those with 19s. This has got a 21-inch front, makes it a lot easier to maneuver through this type of terrain. The throttle response is good, it is crisp, it's not snatchy at all, that's nice. Clutch operation is light and simple. All of those things combine, and you can move your weight around on this bike. I guess not having a massive fuel tank allows you to be able to move your weight, and you need to do that in these slow maneuvering type conditions. Switchgear is good, it's all high quality. You've got your function button, mode, horn, I guess you call it joystick for the screen, indicators which are self-cancelling. That's nice. And your hazard light button. You can do all this with your gloves on as well, which is also nice. Right hand bar, there's only really your start and engine killer there. That's all pretty straightforward. Levers are adjustable, and that's good, especially when you're doing this tight, intricate type stuff. And the reason I thought I would point out how good this is at the slow, technical type riding, some bikes are good at doing this, others are good at high speed work freeways, motorways and all that type of thing. This is good at both. I mean, you can do this walking pace stuff on pretty average surfaces, and yet it'll sit on 130, 140 kilometers an hour. That's 80, 90 mile an hour with ease. I mean, 130 is the limit here in Oz. But I just thought I would point this out. When I talk dual purpose, this is what I mean. I'll just finish with that back wheel, and then I will show you the traction control, which fortunately is switchable to that rear wheel, as is the ABS. Actually, I think I forgot to mention about 190 mil, 7.5 inches of travel in that rear monoshock. Rear brakes, hydraulic, single piston, of course, 256 mil rotor, that's about 10.25 inches. Rear tyre, 150/70 R18. So we had 21 on the front, 18 on the back. The Metzeler, once again, dual purpose. And I have to say, I am very impressed with those Metzeler tyres. I haven't spent a lot of time with Metzeler, but they seem to work well. And of course, the mandatory sound check. I think that is probably one of the nicest sounding standard exhaust systems. Hopefully that comes through okay with the microphone. So of course, how does all this translate into what it's like on the road? And I'm going to talk more about that in my summary at the end. But basically it's great. It's a very easy and confidence-inspiring bike to ride. You can ride it to work during the week, and you can hit the trails on the weekend. I mean, that's how Honda advertised this bike. It is not a motocross bike. It is not an enduro race bike. This is a trail bike, and one that can be modified and done up as a long distance adventure bike. It fits that bill perfectly. On the freeway, it's smooth, it's comfortable, it's fuel efficient. The seating position is just right. Well, someone my size, I'm about 5'10". I did say before that windscreen is noisy, as in the wind rolled off onto my helmet. I didn't get head buffet, but yes, it was a little bit noisy. And interestingly, even in the higher speed environment through here, it's a pretty sure-footed thing to ride. It's a nice place to be. The quick shifter, I spoke about that. That's great. The brakes, I got no brake fade at all. Yes, that 21-inch front wheel, it's a little bit slow to turn in compared to a 17, but you would expect that, wouldn't you? It's what the style of bike is. It's still a heap of fun. I loved the quick shifter. It's great under hard acceleration and braking. I mean, this motor is excellent. I would almost buy this bike for the motor. As an on-road package for this style of bike, it's pretty hard to fault. As far as from the front, you can see the low beam light is on there. There is your high beam high, low. I had it out last night in the dark. I didn't take the camera. Look, it's not bad. It's not, nothing to write home about. I think if you were doing long adventure touring, you'd be hanging a set of spotties off of here, but more than adequate. Left indicator, right indicator, or other way around. If you're watching this on your screen, they probably look like they're strobing in the video. They're not. That's a constant light. They're like our daytime running light. Some people like it, some don't. I actually quite like the look of it, but yeah, pretty simple. There's nothing too loud on the front of this bike, if you know what I mean. It's nice and simple, lightweight, everything's compact. The little TFT screen on the Transalp, it's actually not a bad thing. I was quite interested in how easy it was to use. It's pretty intuitive. I like the way the heated grips are incorporated into the main screen. Most of your relevant information is on here. I could make an entire video on just how to use this, but I'll cut it short. You've got 5 different modes: sport, standard, rain, gravel, and user. I tended to spend most of my time in user. That allowed me to turn off the traction control, and of course you can also switch off the rear ABS in sunlight or dark. Yeah, look, it's pretty good to use. Left-hand side of the bike, gear lever down here, and it's tucked in away. It's not sitting out proud, so that should be well protected. You can see the mechanism that comes up here to the quick shifter setup. Side stand, reasonable sized little foot, but if you're out adventure riding and you're doing a lot of sand work, of course, you'd want one of the big foot sections that clips onto there. This one's fitted with a center stand. Now I know they're not everyone's cup of tea because you do lose clearance underneath the bike. On the flip side of that, if you get a rear puncher when you're out and about, it makes it so much easier to get to the back wheel and of course service your chain. This being a chain drive, nice and simple. Pop it on the center stand. Actually, I'll show you how simple it is to put on the center stand. Lift it up, put your foot straight on the center stand and basically push down hard, hold the rear handlebar here, and that's it, it's up. Even on the gravel, it goes up really simply. Removing the seat, key in, there's a little keyhole here, nice and tucked away, turn, and that's it. Seat just pops off. Underneath the seat, look, there's not really any storage room, maybe just a little bit here, but not much. However, everything is accessible. There's your battery, there is your fuse box, there is your toolkit, all fairly simple. To put it back on, you've just got that one little slot that you mount up on the peg there, and there's your locker at the rear. So if we get that, put it in the hole, and seat is on. Good solid rear grab rails on this one. I mean, this is super solid. One of the most solid I have seen on the back. So fitting a top box, of course, wouldn't be a problem. You'd be able to get, I don't know what the load capacity would be, but super solid on the back. And I would imagine, and I haven't seen the rear mounts for the panniers on this, but I would imagine they pick up on here and here. But yeah, good, easy, simple. Now this next segment on traction control, it's not a recommendation, but it's how I ride when I'm off-road. Now this is what happens if you don't turn off the traction control. I'm going to open the throttle wide open.
Sounds bloody awful.
Of course, every time that rear wheel starts to spin, it cuts the ignition. And if you're partway through a slide or something, it's going to buck you. So that was buck as in B-U-C-K, because you need to steer a bike with the rear end. Now, I've heard a few people complain about turning off this traction control, but it's really not that hard. If you look here, I don't know if you can see that in the camera. There's a little T, I don't know if that's clear enough. All you do is down here on the left control, gloves on, doesn't matter. See the mode button? I'm going to hold that in for about 3 seconds and you look at that T. 1, 2, 3, oh sorry, it's starting over on the P, which is power. With this one here, you just flick it to the right. Over, over. Now the T is flashing. So we've just arrowed it across here. Then you just hold it up. So that's it. Traction control is now off. You can see the T has come up in the orange. In all seriousness, now I was explaining how I did it then, that is a 3 or 4 second job. It's just not hard. But here's the difference it makes when the traction control is off.
suddenly she is a rocket, and you can do what you want with that rear wheel. So there you go, traction on and traction off.
Unfortunately, we have to put fuel in these things, so let's have a quick look at the tank capacity and economy.
I'm just headed up to the shack for the weekend, and since that last refuel, I've done 100 kilometres or 100.2 kilometres, as you can see there, about 62 mile. I've been travelling in mainly 60 to 70 mile an hour zones. That's 100 to 110 kilometres per hour. And you can see the fuel consumption has been 3.9 litres per 100. And I've been riding sensibly. So that, in effect, makes the Transalp, with its fuel capacity, a very good mile muncher.
Fuel capacity wise, 16.9 litres of fuel. That's around, I guess, just shy of 4.5 gallons US. Now, based on what we saw earlier, did we see that? If we haven't, we will. You should be able to get around 350 kilometres, which would be in the region of 220 miles per tank, per fill. By then, you're wanting to get off anyway and have a stretch or a rest break or whatever. Rear hinging cap, once again, I'm sure there's a reason for this, that the manufacturers all put these rear hinging caps on, but it's just awkward, especially when you've got these unleaded that have got the small hole in there and you're trying to get the pump around. There must be a reason they don't hinge them forward. I don't know what it is, but there you go. Decent fuel capacity and metal tank. So if you're using a magnetic tank bag, it's nice and simple. It'll stick to there. Seat height, 850 millimetres. That's around 30, actually probably whisker over 33 inches. Now I'm 5'10" with about a 31 and a half inner, and I can't flat foot it. I'm on the balls of my feet, but I haven't found that an issue at all because the bike's not dramatically heavy. It's 208 kilos. What's that? I'll put it in pounds up on the screen. So it's not overly heavy. I know when I rode the Suzuki, the 800, nice bike, but it was 20 kilograms, a bit over that, 20 kilograms heavier. That's like having a fuel can, a jerry can, full of water sitting on your lap. You start adding an extra 20 kilos and, well, don't I know it nowadays, but you start adding an extra 20 kilos, you can really feel that weight, especially when you're doing the tight technical stuff. As far as the seating goes, comfort-wise, super comfortable. I've spent a lot of time in the saddle. And look, I have to say, this is a really nice place to be. So what is my summary and conclusion? Oh, before I forget, if you like the video, don't forget to give it the thumbs up for me and subscribe so you can see future videos, and I've got a whole heap of past videos, etc. Now, firstly, it looks good, and that's important. It's nice to have a nice looking bike. I mean, the upper middleweight adventure bike scene, and by that I mean the dual purpose adventure bike scene, it's a pretty hotly contested segment, and this bike is a major player. Now, I'm only going to compare it to the other two main competitors in the Japanese built machines, and some riders will only buy Japanese bikes, and I get that. They're super reliable, they've got big dealer networks, and 99% of dealers are more than happy to trade a well looked after Japanese bike when it's time to move it on. So I get the whole Japanese bike thing. This bike comes in as of August 2024 at 15,750 Australian dollars right away. That is a lot of bike for the money. And both of its competitors, the Yamaha Tenere 700 and the Suzuki 800, are both more expensive. I mean, they're both very good bikes as well. The Tenere 700 is a really good bike, but probably more off-road focused than on off-road. The Suzuki 800, it's a lovely bike. It's beautifully put together, but it is heavy, and that becomes important, especially when you start loading them up with all the adventure gear. So yeah, I mean, we've already spoken about that in the video. So what are the Transalp strengths? Well, look, from the moment I picked this bike up, it just felt right. Within 1 minute, I felt comfortable. The riding position, the controls, the ergonomics in general. It's not too heavy. It's got the Honda street cred, I guess you call it, when you pull up somewhere for a coffee. It's a confidence-inspiring thing. The brakes are good, and that sweet 750 or 755 cc motor, it is just a gem. The suspension, although nothing outstanding, it's good enough that you can spend an entire day in the saddle without feeling fatigued and totally knackered at the end of the day. And that's important if you're thinking of doing dual purpose adventure riding on pretty average roads, etc. And of course, some trail work. It's not terrible, but it's not a massive off-road suspension. The controls are quality materials. They're straightforward to use, and by that, I mean you don't have to be a rocket scientist to navigate your way around the screen. ABS and traction control, they're switchable, and that's good. I mean, you can even do that on the fly. I do have a couple of gripes, and that is no cruise control. And before you say it, I know you're going to say, well, that just puts more onto the cost, but it would be nice. And the air filter access, well, that leaves somewhat to be desired. In fact, it sucks. But I guess once you've done it a couple of times, it'll become second nature. It'll become a whole lot easier. Economy is good. Every accessory you could possibly want is available for this bike to make it a top shelf, dual purpose adventure machine. This is a very, very good thing, and I'm sure it'll put a smile on your dial every time you climb into the saddle. It's just a really nice place to be.